Herzlich willkommen in meinem Londoner Homeoffice. Schön, dass Sie wieder mit dabei sind. Mein Name ist Renate Schnutt und ich bin Ansprechperson für österreichische Startups hier im Vereinigten Königreich. Ich supporte diese bei sämtlichen Fragen rund um das Themenspektrum Wachstum, Expansion, Fragen zum Auslandsmarkt und selbstverständlich auch um Themen des Investments. Ich werde Sie heute wieder durch unser Webinar International Growth Strategies mit Fokus Business to Business begleiten. Für manche ist es bereits die zweite Runde. Wir haben am 17. November den ersten Teil zum Themenspektrum P2C bereits gestartet. Sie können das Recording hierzu auf unserem YouTube-Channel selbstverständlich finden. Ein kurzer Blick auf das heutige Programm. Nach einem aktuellen Brexit- bzw. Wirtschaftsupdate unseres Wirtschaftsdelegierten Christian Käsberg hier in London springen wir auch gleich sofort in das spannende Thema Growth Strategies mit Howard Kingston. Wir haben selbstverständlich wieder eine Q&A-Session für Sie geplant. Das Webinar dauert circa eine Stunde, das heißt circa bis um 12. Lieber Christian, ich übergebe nun das Wort an dich mit der brennenden Frage, wie geht es unserem englischen Patienten? Gibt es positive Entwicklungen auf der Wirtschaftsfieberkurve?
Danke, Renate. Spannendes Thema, International Growth Strategy. Spannend bleibt es auch in den Kellern oder Hinterzimmern, in denen die Europäische Union und ihre britischen Freunde oder Feinde, je nachdem wie man sieht, noch immer über den Brexit verhandeln. Too close to call. Für ein gutes Drittel von Ihnen ist das die zweite Predigt des Wirtschaftsdelegierten. Für Sie ist es die nächsten 4-5 Minuten eine exzellente Gelegenheit, sich anderen systemerhaltenden Verrichtungen zu widmen. Für die, die es noch nicht gehört haben oder die es ein zweites Mal hören wollen, ein Kurzbesuch am Krankenbett des britischen Patienten. Man muss das Rad ein bisschen zurückdrehen, um zu verstehen, was hier passiert. Dass die Pandemie hier aufschlägt im Februar, trifft das Virus bereits auf einen geschwächten Gegner durch die Geburtswehen des Brexit und sie fällt auf unglücklicherweise sehr fruchtbaren Boden. Also das Virus fällt auf fruchtbaren Boden. Die Bevölkerung, die hohe Bevölkerungsdichte und die massiven sozialen Ungleichgewichte begünstigen die Ausbreitung der Infektion. Dazu kommen politische Fehlstellungen und Versäumnisse, die in der ersten Pandemiewelle zu einer massiven Verschlechterung der Situation führen. Großbritannien wird Pandemie-Europameister mit einer Übersterblichkeit, die fast 8-mal höher ist als in Österreich und bleibt das leider auch bis in den Winter. Die Briten haben zwar gestern als erstes westliches Land eine Impfung zugelassen, ändert nichts daran, dass das Land nur sehr bedingt auf diese zweite Welle vorbereitet ist. Deswegen geht es hier auch wirtschaftlich steiler nach unten und flacher nach oben als anderswo. Die britische Wirtschaftsleistung wird um fast 12% zurückgehen heuer im Verhältnis zu Österreich. Gestern oder vor 3 Tagen hat das WIF von -8% für Österreich prognostiziert. Ein mageres, ein trauriges Ergebnis, obwohl so viel Geld in Hilfsmaßnahmen und Unterstützungsmaßnahmen für die Wirtschaft investiert wurde, mehr als anderswo. Trotzdem bleibt die Situation hier schwierig. Schlechte Nachrichten, vor allem, dass es langsamer bergauf geht als anderswo. Die Briten werden wahrscheinlich bis 2023, wenn nicht bis 2024 brauchen, um wieder in die volkswirtschaftliche Gewinnzone zu manövrieren. Über all dem schwebt das Damoklesschwert Brexit. Das Spiel spielt seit 4 Jahren, ähnlich wie seit 4 Jahren grüßt das tägliche Murmeltier, to deal or not to deal. Es geht immer wieder um dasselbe, Souveränität versus Integrität des Binnenmarkts. Die Briten wollen Unabhängigkeit und die EU will robuste Garantien gegen den unlauteren Wettbewerb. Es zeichnet sich zunehmend ab, dass es 5 vor 12 doch einen Kuhhandel geben wird, dass man doch eine Einigung findet, dass dieses magere Freihandelsabkommen, über das jetzt noch verhandelt wird, tatsächlich zustande kommt. Allerdings muss man sich immer vor Augen halten, was immer passiert, also ob es zu einem Abkommen kommt oder nicht, verlässt Großbritannien am 1. Jänner die Zollunion, den Binnenmarkt und das harmonisierte Umsatzsteuersystem. Und damit kommen für österreichische Unternehmen, die hier Geschäfte machen, massive Hürden und Hindernisse auf diese Geschäftstätigkeit zu. Das Geschäft mit Großbritannien wird schwieriger, es wird teurer, aber es wird auf der anderen Seite weder unmöglich noch wird es unprofitabel, weil Großbritannien bleibt die zweitgrößte Volkswirtschaft Europas. Großbritannien bleibt ein extrem interessanter, riesiger Nahmarkt, fast ohne Sprach- und Kulturbarrieren, bleibt ein Land mit niedriger Unternehmensbesteuerung, mit sehr unternehmensfreundlichen Rahmenbedingungen, bleibt eine Plattform, ein Trend- und Wissensknoten für Hochtechnologieunternehmen, die hier Partner suchen können. Die Briten sind in vielen Technologiebereichen, Artificial Intelligence, Cybersecurity, Fintech, aber auch in vielen anderen Sektoren nach wie vor Ranglistenführer, bleibt ein Sprungbrett und eine Brücke in das internationale Geschäft mit britischen Partnern, die international ein tieferes und breiteres Netzwerk haben als wir. Und Großbritannien, spezifisch London, bleibt natürlich vor allem ein extrem spannender Spielplatz für die Internationalisierung von Startups. Nichts an den Pfeilern, auf denen dieses Ökosystem steht, hat sich massiv geändert. Die Stadt ist nach wie vor ein Finanzzentrum, der Firmensitz der Global 1000, hat eine ungeheure Anziehungskraft auf Human Talent. Das heißt, im Großen und Ganzen immer noch ein extrem spannendes Feld, um sich zu bewegen, vornehmlich um sich als Startup hier zu bewegen. Trotzdem, der Brexit wird Wirklichkeit. Wir müssen uns vorbereiten darauf. Wir müssen sehen, dass wir hier sozusagen über die Hürden kommen. Aber wenn uns das gelingt und wenn man die Gelegenheiten, die dieser Markt weiterhin bietet, nützt, dann lohnt sich das wirtschaftlich für alle. Damit bin ich am Ende. Danke fürs Zuhören. Ein ganz besonders herzliches Dankeschön für die sich zum zweiten Mal angehört haben. Und damit zurück zu dir, Renate. Und ich wünsche Ihnen alle eine tolle und spannende Veranstaltung.
Ja, neben den soeben genannten generellen Herausforderungen Brexit und Covid gibt es vor allem 3 essentielle Punkte, die sich noch im Startup-Bereich als wesentlich erachten. Das ist auf jeden Fall Zugang zu Talent, also die Einschränkungen der Personenfreizügigkeit, Zugang zu Kapital. Hier haben wir in den letzten Wochen viel gelesen, dass es zwar die Prozesse verlängern sich, bis man eben die einzelnen Dinge am Termsheet dann auch manifestiert hat. Das heißt, es erfordert einfach mehr Geduld, aber das Investment oder die Ambition, in Unternehmen zu investieren, ist ungebrochen. Die Anzahl der Scale-Ups in UK haben sich im heurigen Jahr sogar verdoppelt. Das heißt, es gibt natürlich ein paar Marktbarrieren im Tech-Company-Bereich auch, aber nicht so viele, wie die Old Economy mehr oder weniger zu meistern hat. And now I'm going to switch the language here, and I would say that we fully immerse into the today's topic. And I would like to welcome a very special guest. So Howard Kingston is a British founder and expert, and he will open up his toolkit for you today and will give some insight how to deal with growth strategy in the new normal. So Howard, welcome, and the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Renat. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. My name's Howard Kingston. Real pleasure to be here with you today. I'm coming in from London. I'm based there in London today, but my accent is Irish, just in case you're wondering what my accent is from. So I would love to know where you are, where you're watching this today. So what city you're in. Please just share in the chat. Just share in the chat, where are you today? I always love to know where everyone is coming in from. Amazing. Linz. Vienna. Beautiful. Salzburg. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Amazing. Cool. So guys, in this session, I really want to talk about how to think about international growth strategy, particularly during these uncertain times, and particularly with everything that's happening in the world today. Now, on this screen here, you see a picture of a rocket taking off into space. And this is one of my favorite images for a few reasons. One, I'm a big science and space geek, but also because I remember when I was reading about rocket science about a year or two ago, I was reading about how when the space shuttle takes off like this, the huge big rockets that it's attached to are full of fuel. And it burns up. When I was reading, I read that when the space shuttle takes off, it burns off 96% of all of the fuel in those rocket tanks, in those fuel tanks, in the first 7 minutes. So all that fuel burnt off in only 7 minutes. And why? Because it takes a huge amount of energy for that rocket to take off and come out off the ground. I remember when I was reading it, it kind of reminded me of what it felt like for me when I was launching businesses into new markets. And I always kind of felt that I was burning off a lot of energy, trying to get off the ground, trying to get traction, as they call it. And sometimes I wonder, for all the energy I'm burning off, shouldn't I really have been able to go up further, faster? So I remember that was my feeling for the first 1 or 2 businesses that I launched, both here in London and scaled internationally. And what I want to talk about today is how to kind of release the gravity and make your rocket go up faster so you don't have to burn off so much energy when you're doing it. Okay, so here is the problem if we don't know how to launch effectively, particularly in the current environment, and launch and scale into new markets. Here's the problem if we don't know. First of all, we launch and we get together, tell our team, tell the management that we're launching into it, we're cracking a new market, whether it be the UK or whether it be wherever you want. And we get all excited, and then if things don't go according to plan, we can launch and things can be quite quiet and we can get no customers. And that, but not only is bad for business, but is bad for reputation, and none of us want that, okay? The second thing is going into a new market, there's a lot of things to learn. We have to get our sales team ready. We need to get our product, get our product market fit. We feel like we're doing everything and spinning a lot of plates, and it's an easy way to burn out. And then ultimately, if we're doing everything, we're not really doing it that effectively, and we aren't getting customers. Ultimately, we all have a target when we're scaling internationally. It's because we want growth, and we can miss that target, which is a major issue, and that leads to failure, and we don't want that. So, but what I want to talk about today is the opportunity if we get this right. First of all, we can launch into a business, into a new market, and get a steady stream of customers, steady stream of leads, even in today's environment. Rather than doing everything, we can just really get focused on doing the right things. And one of the big things about launching into a new market is doing the right things. Okay, scaling internationally is about doing the right things, not just doing everything and spinning all the plates. And that ultimately means we can hit target, makes us look good, and also has the business succeeding. And that can be successful. Okay, now what I want to talk about today is 3 hot principles of what to think about in launching internationally, scaling internationally in the current environment. I do have time for questions. Like, of course, it's going to be rapid fire. We've got about 30 minutes together today, 30, 40 minutes, but I will have time for questions. So do take note of any questions that comes into your mind as we're going through, and we're going to have about 15 minutes, 20 minutes for questions at the end, okay? So the first hot principle is to use the activators. Now, in today's environment, I really see there are 2 types of businesses. There are businesses that have really struggled to survive in today's environment in 2020. We're coming towards the end of 2020, and for some businesses, that will be good riddance, good luck, goodbye. That was a challenging year. But for other businesses, that has not been the case. And some other businesses, just the fact is, has thrived in 2020. So the question is, what's the what's been the key differences between the two. And the key difference is both from a product perspective, but also being able to really embrace bringing your core sales and growth strategy online. For some people, depending on the business, being able to really go to market and scale digitally was, you know, maybe a part of the strategy or a nice to have, whereas in 2020, it became absolutely essential, as in, unless you've got a really well thought out online digital growth strategy for whether you're in your own market or international market, you're not really in business anymore. And that's really the reality of what hit so many people in 2020. So we want to make sure we activate any market we go into really, really fast. So one of the key things when we're going into a new market is that we can't assume the product that we were using in another market, let's say our own market. Let's say we're entering a new market, let's say, for example, UK or London. We can't assume what's called the product market fit, what worked in one market is exactly the same as a new market. We can't do that. Now, what is this thing called product market fit? You might say, some of you may have heard of this term, some of you may not. Product market fit is a term that came from Silicon Valley a few years ago from a movement that was started by a gentleman called Eric Ries. And he's the founder of what's called the lean startup movement. And product market fit is simply making sure that the product that we have is fitting with what the market needs are. The two almost need to be like a piece of Lego and connect together. And a lot of failure of businesses launching into new markets is when when there are assumptions of what the market wants, because, I built the product, I know best. And when they actually go to market, they don't quite connect. Okay, and this is something called product market fit. It's called product market fit because as we're going into a market, a lot of the time we have to do what's called a pivot. Okay, and a pivot is when we change a strategy based on a piece of data we may get from the market. Okay, so I'll be talking more about pivots in just a second, but for now we need to think about making sure that we have product market fit when we enter a market. Now, what do I mean? What's an example of a business that entered a market or launched and needed to establish if they had product market fit? One of the key things when you're entering a market like that is to do it in what's called the minimum viable way, minimum viable product. Okay. Now, a business you've all heard of, Dropbox, which is now multi-billion-pound business, they very famously employed this strategy when they were launching and they were looking to build out their product a few years ago. Building out Dropbox at the time was going to be a huge undertaking. Of course, we're all familiar with cloud storage now, but at the time it was a huge innovation. And rather than them building it and then hoping that it fits with the market, they didn't want to do it that way. They wanted to make sure they had product market fit really, really early on before they then spent millions and years of time building the product. Okay, so it's all about finding that product market fit early before you commit the resources. Okay, and in their case, what they did was they simply, rather than building the product that didn't exist, they created a video of it, of what it would look like when it was built. Very simple, it was a 4 or 5 minute video, and they created a landing page and put it on it. Okay, and then they dropped that landing page with the video into communities of where their exact target customer lived. And in Dropbox's case, it was Hacker News. Okay, that's a community of hackers and developers. Okay, so what happened was they got on the landing page, it said, if you find this interesting, if you think we should build this, please enter your email. And the Dropbox founders were hoping they might get, if they get maybe a few hundred emails of developers saying, yes, I'd like to know when you launch it, that would be what's called a positive indicator. Okay, they left it in Hacker News for a few weeks, and when they checked back, they had over 20,000 emails signed up of early sign-ups from developers, and that was an indicator for them. So there's definite need here. We have the confidence, we have product market fit. Now let's invest the resources. So the real kind of takeaway for you is when you're entering and scaling internationally, don't make assumptions that what worked in your own market will exactly work in another market, and make sure we do a test. Okay. Now, one example of this is, I'm kind of going nicely into the second point, is that when I was launching a business into the London market, and I'm from Ireland initially, when I was launching in, I didn't know anybody in London, just like a lot of you who are like looking to launch into new markets won't know all the people to contact. So I wanted to think of how do I launch my business into London and get in front of the right people. Okay. Now my business that I was launching was a mobile advertising business. I was launching to B2B clients, so people like major media agencies, Nike, Adidas, Snapchat, these kind of global brands I wanted to get in front of. Okay. And I initially went in and I just started trying to get lots of meetings. And that's a really common thing. Someone goes into a new market and they will just try and meet everyone that they think is relevant. Okay. And that's what I did initially. And what happened was I was having a lot of meetings. So I was having a lot of activity. So the activity was high, but unfortunately I wasn't getting the conversions that I wanted to. Okay, and that's a critical thing in a B2B strategy, is not only having the activity, but also having the conversion rate where we want it. So I was having a lot of activity, but I wasn't getting any sales, which obviously is an issue. So when we paused and relooked and reanalyzed our strategy, and what I found was, as I spoke to some other advisors in the market, I found that the agencies I was contacting, and there's lots of different agencies in a market like London, all these different agencies I was speaking to, they all liked it and they all had the meeting and they all thought it was great, but guess what? They weren't buying it. So I did not have product market fit with them. Okay, I didn't have product market fit. So as I analyzed more and I started speaking to a few more customers, I realized I needed to do a slight pivot in my strategy. I needed to pivot the exact person and type of agency, type of customer I was speaking to. Okay, and in my case, I had to pivot away from general agencies to one specific type of agency. They were the only agency type in my market, in that new market, that would buy what I was selling. And I did that. And then I realized there was, 2,000 people in each of these agencies. So I then had to pivot to the exact customer job title of the person I was speaking to in each agency. Okay, and that in my case was an account director. Okay, and so all of a sudden I went from a potential target market of people to speak to in this new market of probably about 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. I pivoted it and I narrowed it down to 10 agencies, each with about 12 people in each agency. Okay, so that was a target market of 120 people. And that became my new focus. And I was able to really refine my focus to only those 120 people. Okay, what's the lesson? One, make sure that you really know who your target customer is, but also, and this is a really important point that I think people forget when they're scaling, is that businesses don't buy things. Businesses don't buy things. It's the job title. There's somebody in the business that you are trying to contact whose job it is will be responsible for signing the check and buying what you have. And if you're speaking to the wrong people in those businesses, they will not buy it. They might like it, but they won't make a purchase. Okay? And I just want to be as practical as possible. with you guys today. And like really practically, how did I even get in front of people? I'm going into a new market. How would I even get in front of these people from these global brands? I don't know them. I'm not from the area. How would I do it? Because you guys, you will be in the same situation. And in my case, I will create a spreadsheet with all the names of the 120 people that I wanted to contact, 10 agencies, 12 people in each agency, using LinkedIn, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, the premium version you should be using allows you to get really well filtered on the type of customers that you want to approach, from what kind of business, what city, etc. And then using a tool like Hunter, Email Hunter, hunter.io, I recommend you all make a note of that one if you don't know it already, hunter.io. I can put in any company name I want to, and it'll bring me up lists of the email addresses of the people at that company. So let's say, for example, I'm trying to target someone from Pepsi, okay? In a new market, I just go onto hunter.io, type in Pepsi, it will bring me up all the thousands of email addresses of real people in Pepsi. And then what I just need to do is I just need to map the person I'm speaking to, I want to speak to the same email structure that I see on hunter.io. Okay, because when we look at email structures, once we know one person's email structure in in a company, for example, an email structure is howard.kingston@pepsi.co.com, then I know 90% of the time everyone else has the same email structure. Okay, so I'll be able to take the person from my target list, change their name with the email structure I've learned from hunter.io, and voila, there is the email address. I'll be able to email that person, and I know I'll have confidence it's going straight to them. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. A very practical insight of how to think about product market fit and use it when entering a new market. Okay, so that's the first of the hot principles. Principle number 2 is to really focus on the 3%. Okay, so I want to talk about one of my favorite pieces of research, which I read about a few years ago about Harvard University and Harvard Business School. And I read that in 1979, a group of researchers went to Harvard Business School, which is on the image here, and they wanted to analyze the success of the people that attended the MBA class. And this at the time was the most sought after place to go to university. So the Harvard MBA. And there was about 100, 120 people in the class. And in 1979, a group of researchers came in and they spent a year really tracking their habits, their behaviors, all these kind of things, and to really see not only what were the habits and behaviors of these successful people were, but particularly they wanted to see of that class, 120 people, there's going to be some people in that class that will outperform the rest, like the best of the best. And they wanted to see if there was any habits, traits, behaviors, etc., that really made those people stand out from the crowd. Okay, and they found something interesting. They found that there was something when they researched that group of people in 1979, and then they tracked their performance over time for 10 years. They found there was a small number of people in the class, 3% of the people in the class, that far outperformed the rest of the people in the class, like the elite of the elite. Okay, and they earned far higher salaries. Okay, so what do you think it was? When the researchers went back to their notes and they started looking at their research notes, there was one common trait between all those people. What do you think it was? I'd love you to have a guess in the chat. Do you think you know what made the successful people so successful in that group? Just please share in the chat if you'd like to have a guess at what you think that might be. What do you think it was? Because when they analyzed, they saw there was one common trait between the most successful people. What do you think it was? What do you think it was if you had to have a guess? Please share in the chat. Do you think it was confidence? Do you think it was natural ability? Growth mindset? Yeah, some good guesses. Focus. I like this. I like that. So it was 3%, and they outperformed more than 10 times the other 97% combined. Well, this is what it was. And the person that said focus was pretty much there. 1979, it was all about having a clear goal. Okay, all about having a clear goal. 97% of the class kind of had either no goals set or some kind of wishy-washy goals, but 3% of the class had a very, very clear goal, but also had a plan how to get there. Very, very clear plan how to get there. Okay, and that was the key thing that separated the 3% from the 97%. Now, why are we talking about this in an international growth strategy session? Because one of the key things we see is companies, when they're launching and they're looking to add in an international growth strategy, one is they need to make sure they have product market fit, okay? And they're talking to the right customer, just like we've been speaking about so far. But most of the time when I'm speaking to these businesses, they don't have a clear outcome that is very well defined for this new market strategy. They're a little bit like the 97% of people in the MBA class who didn't have a clear goal. And the question is, if we don't have a clear goal and we don't know where we're trying to get to, very specifically, what's the likelihood that we'll end up there versus ending up somewhere else? You know, I always like to use the example that we would, after COVID times and we're back to able to go traveling again, how would you book a holiday? You would pick somewhere you wanted to get to. That's a new market, okay, from a business perspective. And then you'd work backwards. You'd then work backwards and you'd think, what is the plane that is going to get me there? Okay, and you'd go into Skyscanner or one of these things and go, cool. And then you go, okay, how am I going to get to the airport? So you backwards plan very specifically, okay? And that backwards planning is a technique which is used in the military because it is a far better way to approach a strategic plan. Now, reality is most businesses I speak to when they're thinking about scaling and enter new markets, etc., they don't do that. They go, okay, I want to enter a new market, but then they don't really plan exactly what success looks like and what is the core KPI that will measure whether they are successful, that they can look at, track maybe in 6 months' time and say, okay, has this been successful or not? Okay, so that's why we need, when we're doing an international growth plan, we need to make sure we have what's called a SMART goal for that specific strategy. Okay, and SMART goal, some of you will have heard this already. It stands for SMART, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. So a bad example of a SMART goal for your international strategy will be, we want it to be a huge success. We want brand recognition. We want to enter the market successfully. Well, how do you know if you've achieved it after, some 6 months or a year's time? So that's why we need a SMART goal. A SMART goal will be different. We'll say, okay, we want to have 1% market share after 12 months. That's a SMART goal. We want to have 10,000 new clients signed up within the first 9 months of market entry. That's a SMART goal. And the SMART goal allows us to then backwards plan from that. Okay, and it really does underpin your whole strategy. As Mark Zuckerberg famously said, I remember listening to him in Barcelona Mobile World Congress a few years ago, and he said something that made a big impression on me when he was asked what was the biggest thing that made a difference for Facebook in the first few years. And he said, our success can be defined on one guiding principle, focusing on one goal at a time. And this just really reinforces the point, if we are doing an international growth strategy, make sure we have not only product market fit, not only targeting the right customer, but we have a very, very clear outcome. Otherwise, we'll just end up doing a lot of things, but not really getting the traction that we want to. And then the third and the final thing I want to say when we're thinking of going into a market, and this is a bit of what you might call a growth hack. Everyone likes a good growth hack, right? Is when I'm thinking of entering a new market, I always like to do something called leverage R&D. Now, what does R&D stand for? I'd love, can anyone share in the chat? What does R&D stand for, please? What does R&D stand for? Just want to make sure we have an understanding of what R&D stands for. Just share in the chat, please. R&D. What does R&D stand for? Someone's just asked if I can repeat the SMART goal definition. Yes. SMART goal stands for the following. SMART goal is S is specific. So I'll just let you write this down. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Okay? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Specific and measurable means it should have a very clear objective outcome, like a number is always good, or website launched, a project finished. So someone from the outside could just look and say, yes, that was achieved or not achieved. And you can usually measure that. Okay? Attainable, make sure that you have the resource to attain your target. You know, I remember speaking to one tech startup founder, and her goal was to get 1 million customers in 6 months of launch. And I said, okay, you know, that's possible. Anything's possible if you have the right resources. And I asked her, what's your budget? She goes, oh, I don't have any budget, marketing budget. I was like, is that really attainable? So let's not set ourselves up for failure. Relevant means it should be relevant to your company. And then time-based should be a time around it. Okay, hopefully that answers that question about SMART. Okay. R&D, what does R&D stand for? Well, research and development is what most people say, but not for a growth hacker. A growth hacker, and I will call R&D rob and duplicate, okay? Not research and development, rob and duplicate, or steal like an artist, as Steve Jobs and Picasso famously said. So I suppose you want to ask yourself a question. If you're entering a new market and you're trying to figure out the right go-to-market strategy, would it be useful if you could look at your closest competitors in that market and analyze how they're getting their leads? How are they getting their customers? How are they advertising? What's their advertising look like? What messaging are they using? Now, I'm not saying for a minute you should copy it, but what I am saying is chances are it could probably shortcut some understanding that will help you, okay? And that's what rob and duplicate is all about. Steal like an artist. You don't see anyone doing, you know, copying art exactly. That's illegal, but you do see people being inspired from other people who are having success, and there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, it's a very good practice. Okay, so how do we do R&D when we're thinking about launching a company or launching into a new market? There's a number of tools for that, but I'll give you two tools that I think you'll find really, really useful today. One is called SimilarWeb, and I'll let you play around with that in your own time because we've got limited time on the webinar today. SimilarWeb.com has a free trial and is a free tool that you can put in any company's name at the top. So let's say you're entering the US, okay, and you've got a new travel company, okay. Maybe you want to analyze how does Airbnb get its traffic. You can go to similarweb.com and enter Airbnb, and it will bring you down all of the analytics of Airbnb's website and tell you where they're getting their customers from, what percentage of people from different markets. It will tell you what marketing channels are they receiving their traffic from. Okay, what marketing channels? Are they getting it from search engine optimization, from Google? What keywords are people typing in to find Airbnb. It will tell you if they're using paid advertising. Now, if I see a successful company, a multi-million, billion-dollar business, competitor of mine that is using a certain marketing channel, let's say, for example, Google Ads, what might that teach me? So think about that for a second. If I saw that a key competitor in a new market is using Google Ads, and it has done for a long period of time, what might that teach me? Sometimes when I ask that question, some people say, "Oh, they're struggling to get customers." And I think, no, not at all. If I see a successful business and they've been using a marketing channel for a long period of time, let's say Google Ads, it really means one of two things. Either it doesn't work and they're very stupid, or it does work and they're very smart. And if it's a successful business, chances are it's the latter. So I will look at something like that. And if I see a competitor in a market is using one marketing channel for a long period of time, I'll go, you know what, maybe I should test that marketing channel as well, because in that market seems to work. Okay. And the second part of that is that it also gives you exact imagery around their ads. Okay, so in SimilarWeb, and there's also a tool called Moat, MOAT.com, Moat, M-O-A-T, where you can put competitors and it'll bring up the exact images they're using in their advertising and have done over the last 6 to 12 months. Again, you'll be able to then quickly see, they're doing that successfully in that market. Maybe my design team or my marketing team can get inspiration from that too. Okay, so guys, what we've just been talking about is really 3 things to think about when we have been talking through international growth strategy. We talked about 1, use the activators, make sure that we have a product market fit. We pivot our customer approach if needed to make sure we're speaking to the right person. We can use tools like hunter.io to help with that. Tip number 2, make sure that we're not trying to do everything at once. We have intense focus and we are doing some backwards planning. And 3 is that we are leveraging R&D and feeling like an artist, as we can see here on the image. Okay, so guys, it's been a real pleasure. I'm just conscious of time. I wanted to give as much as I could during the 40 minutes we're kind of together, but I do have time for Q&A. So if you were listening and you heard something specific that you'd like to ask me a question on, I do have time for questions now. Okay, so and I do want to make sure that I have a gift for everybody who's on the session today. I always get follow-up questions like, what's the best tool for this? What's the best tool for that? What's the best tool for growth hacking, etc. So I've combined all of the tools that I use on a day-to-day basis into a free ebook called The Growth Toolkit. Okay, and it includes over $1,000 worth of how to get free ad credit on major ad platforms like Facebook, Google, etc. I put that all together, and it's a free resource for all of you guys today. Who's here? So I have a free online community in Facebook for growth hackers and entrepreneurs, and to make it easy for everyone, I've just uploaded the ebook guide into the free community. So once you join, you can join by either going to howardkingston.com/FB, or modern technology is amazing. You can just get your camera on your phone, point it at the screen, open up the camera app on your phone, point it at the screen, and you'll see a link will pop up. Just click the link and it'll bring you directly into Facebook, into the community, and you can just, you'll be able to grab the ebook there. Okay, completely free. I just want to help as many people as I can. Okay, so guys, it's been a real pleasure. If you do have any questions at this point, let me know, and we're here for questions. So I would love everyone, just before we wrap up, just to share in the chat, what was your one big takeaway? I covered a lot of ground in just a few minutes. What was your biggest takeaway? And if you have an action point, if you have any questions, just let me know.
Howard, it was amazing as usually. So I was blown away from this practical approach. A bunch of great takeaways, I would say. Yeah, people are commenting right now. So if you would like to share something, otherwise I'm just looking through the questions and we start with that.
Sure.
Okay, there's one question which is especially referring to your very first example you gave. So what if one does not get many emails in return? Should I test various versions of drafted MVPs at the same time, so not to lose time?
Could you repeat that, Renata? Would you mind?
It was the very first thing you delivered as an example. So I think it was where they built together a landing page. And I think we have these questions referring to that first example where people just committed their interest and then they started to launch it, but they just built it together after they had feedback. And so one specific person of the audience just wanted to know how to do this actually, and should I test various, for example, landing pages?
Sure, that's a great question. You know, and I compliment the person who asked that because they're kind of going, okay, this is a good idea. How do I do it? Which is always a great question, right? So the way I like to think about that is I would really think from your perspective, the way to think about it is this. Rather than just thinking, oh, build a landing page, which might be the solution, but almost think, what is the question you have to be answered about your new business? In Dropbox's case, the question they needed answered was, do people want this? Would they be interested in it? For other people, for another business, it might be, would someone buy this? You know, so the first thing is like, what is the question I want to answer? And then the second thing is, what's the fastest way I could test if that is true or false? So a lot of time, landing pages can be a really quick way to throw up an idea, use some paid advertising, to send some advertising to it and see if people are interested. I've done it multiple times. I'll whip up a landing page, I'll send some traffic to it and see if people buy or at least put in their email address. So I would do one initially. Start with one. Again, because it's called a minimum viable test for a reason. You want to start with something really, really small. So I would, think about what's the answer you want, question you want answered. 2, landing pages can be a good way of doing that. And then think about how I could get some traffic to it quite early on. I would start with one though, and then after you've done one, you might go, okay, what's the next question I want answered? And then go from there. Hopefully that answers your question, but it was a good question.
Another one. In your view, which is the best sufficient conversion tracking tool? So not Google Analytics. Any recommendations?
Was the question not Google Analytics or in addition to Google Analytics?
So what is beside that tool?
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on the product. Like you say, not Google Analytics. Like, just as a disclaimer, I'm a big fan of Google Analytics, especially the goals function, and you can really do a lot of visual funnels through Google Analytics, especially. There is a new version of Google Analytics that was launched about 3 weeks ago called Google Analytics 4. It is not the old version, and your existing code will not work with the new version. You need to upgrade your code, and that is an incredibly powerful tool. So I will talk about other tools, but don't just get Google Analytics, especially Google Analytics 4. It's incredibly powerful. Now, on top of that, tools I use personally, I always like to recommend tools I use personally. Hotjar for conversion and UX is incredibly powerful. It allows you to do heat mapping, allows you to look at unique user journeys. It allows you to do recordings of people when they hit your site. That's the first one. Second is you need to do some things called the 5-second test regularly to make sure those first 5 seconds people are understanding. Don't have time to explain a full 5-second test here today, but if you Google how to do a 5-second test, I think that's commonly overlooked and one of the most important parts of conversion tracking. And then the third, I would say, is depending on your product, mixed panel is incredibly powerful. It can be a little bit more app and SaaS product focused, but I'm not sure what that asker their product is. But if you have more of a web app or a mobile app, do consider mixed panel as well.
Another question tying into that one, what tools are you using right now on a daily basis? So
that's a long list. What tools do I use on a daily basis? Okay, so I'll try and talk about, like, I use quite a few, so that's why it's a little bit of a tricky, it's almost like, what area. I'll tell you what I run my tech stack I run my business on. Okay, so my core tech stack is, I'm a big fan of ActiveCampaign. ActiveCampaign is, imagine Salesforce, HubSpot, MailChimp, and Zapier had kind of got together and had a baby. It kind of does that. It's an incredibly powerful email, sales CRM, and automation center. So all of my email automations come from there. And Zapier, I cannot live without. So if you don't know what Zapier is, you really need to educate yourself. It is the way that you can connect almost every product together. So through APIs without being a coder. So I do bit coding, but I'm not like a top developer. But I don't need to be with Zapier. It allows me to connect spokes. Think of it as the middle of a bicycle wheel. And that's the thing that connects all my systems together. I think there are two good ones. I can keep talking, but I have so many tools I use. I don't know where to stop.
I think we kicked something off with the tools because now that people want to know how to spell it, but maybe you can refer them to your Facebook site and maybe you share them there or something. But
that's yeah, for sure. Like, that is why I always get these questions, and it's almost like there's dozens of tools I use on a daily basis, and they're all in this guide. So if you want to know exactly how I run my business and I run my marketing and run my sales team, all of the tools are in that guide.
Yeah, I think I just I can share them after our session, but of course not all of them. So I would like to refer you to Howard's Facebook site. Another question is, so more in relation with the current COVID situation, how do you see things changing during COVID and when it comes to launching business into new markets? What to bear in mind?
Yeah, if anything, like when it comes to specifically COVID and launching into new markets, I actually think it's, I said this at the start, you have to be online now. Like before, some people were like, oh, I do a little bit of online, but I do a lot of physical stuff. Whereas in COVID times, everything is online. So if you're not online first, like for an online first strategy, you're not at the races. And that helps international strategy because you don't need to be there in person. This is almost like a window of opportunity where face-to-face meetings aren't needed. And if I was thinking about growing a business internationally, I take that as an opportunity, not an issue. So what I see businesses that do really well are people that embrace that aren't waiting for things to go back to the way it was because they're not going back to the way. It's a new normal, as people say, and really, really embrace that.
And then there's another question. Would potential users today really accept a video instead of a real shiny product ready to test?
Yeah, I see it all the time. People are still doing it all the time. I launched my minimum viable product for my advertising business, which, the example I gave, the thing I was demoing people when I got in the room was essentially a mock-up demo video. Of course. What I'm not saying is you don't do it well. I didn't say that. Like, you can make something beautiful But it just means instead of spending a year building the code, you create a visual demo. Because the things people will buy into is, does this solution solve the problem I want to be solved? And if there's no other way of it being solved, no other product on the market, they'll say, like, you build this, I'll buy it. And that's when you have product market fit. So I would think not about the video. It's not about the video. It's about the problem you're solving. Hopefully that answers the question.
And another one, will the book be on Audible soon?
Audible is definitely one of my go-to apps on my iPhone, which I absolutely love. But who knows? I hope so. I hope so. I'm writing another book as well. Yeah. If anyone likes a good app on their phone, something I'm really liking at the moment, because I can see everyone likes tools, I highly recommend. There's a really good app I'm using every day at the moment called Be Focused that allows you to kind of just focus your mind on one task at a time for 30-minute blocks. Be Focused, it's free on the App Store, and it's really allowing me to get focused. So just when someone asks a question about something on my phone, I wanted to give you an app that I'm using every day as well.
Thank you for the last recommendation. People are very grateful, as I can see in our chat, as am I. So thank you so much for your contribution today. It was very intriguing and I absolutely loved it. So I hope you have a great time before Christmas and not too much work is piling up at your desk.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me back as always. It's a real honor to be here.
So, bevor ich mich von Ihnen verabschiede, möchte ich noch einen kleinen Hinweis auf eine noch ausbleibende Veranstaltung machen. Diese findet am 9. Dezember statt. Hier geht es um das Thema Global from Day One, die 5 häufigsten Fehler auf dem Internationalisierungskurs und wie man diese vermeidet. Ich werde dann im Anschluss an diese Veranstaltung auch diesen Link noch einmal teilen für Personen, die Interesse an dieser letzten Veranstaltung im heurigen Jahr haben. Ich hoffe sehr, es waren wieder wertvolle Informationen für Sie dabei. Bei Fragen einfach, die noch offen sind, ein kurzes E-Mail an mich und ansonsten bleibt mir nur zu sagen, stay home and stay healthy. Mahlzeit aus London und ich wünsche Ihnen, soweit eben möglich in den gegebenen Umständen, eine schöne Vorweihnachtszeit.